is up? Insomniac Hour. I'm Josh, that is Vince. And how are we doing for all those friends out there who are having trouble sleeping at night? Well, let us bore you to sleep with some talk on physics, quantum physics, cosmology, universal creation theory, dark matter, dark energy, black holes. I mean, fucking the creme of the crop. Like, honestly, out of all the conversations in the world, this is like my absolute favorite.
It's the biggest mind
Yeah.
situation happening for sure. And it becomes very deep.
It does. And it's philosophical. It can be metaphysical at times. I mean, we were just talking about this a second ago, that when you start talking about dark matter and dark energy, this is a new occurrence within physics. And so this theory came about because when they started measuring the background radiation of the universe, they started measuring the amount of mass and energy inherent within the universe, there started to become some problems. Is that all the visible mass in the universe only accounts for roughly about 5 to 6% of actual energy, which means that like 96% of it, 95% of it is not detected. You don't know what it is. And so,
and I guess I was reading it, and it's like you've got dark matter and dark energy, right? Mm-hmm. Which are different.
Yes.
And I guess from observing galaxies and how matter moves, like, you have a spiral galaxy, mm-hmm. You expect matter to move a certain way based on gravity. Well, they saw that things closer to the center of mass, where they have most of the matter, where it should be spinning really fast,
doesn't.
In comparison to the outside, where it should be a little slower, doesn't add up. It's not an
There's
it
an
doesn't
opposition
taper off
force.
right.
There's an opposition force to gravity.
Yeah, there's some other force that's not attributed to a physical matter we could see.
And so basically what this comes about is that gravity tends to be this constant rate dependent upon mass, which you would assume that as the denser something gets, the faster it should spin towards its center of gravity. And they find out there's actually an oppositional force that's at play here, and this is called dark energy.
Now, and that's just another thing that goes to show Einstein is going to one day have an opposing theory that knocks him down.
Well, I already can explain all of this. I seriously can. It's actually really, really easy. And well, we'll talk about that here in a minute. But so dark matter, though, so they had to account for all this gravitational energy and all this force, matter, and energy. So they came up with this theory that what if there was energy or mass in the universe that we couldn't see, and they call it dark matter, right? And so basically, it's out of phase, or it exists in a different dimension, or whatnot. And so they call it dark matter. And they proposed about 20 years ago how to detect it. They spent billions of dollars trying to detect it. To this day, they've detected none of it. Not only that, is that just last month, an article was released in Science. All right? In Science, which is one of the leading physics and scientific journals, that the 20-year study on dark matter and dark energy distribution in the universe would have shown that basically you have dark energy and matter that basically globs up near galaxies. Like kind of what you were just talking about, is towards the center of the galaxy, you're going to have more dark matter because obviously gravity is higher potential there. But they actually don't see that. They see an even distribution amongst the entire universe.
Yeah, and not only that, they say it doesn't get diluted, and they attribute the expansion of the universe, which is basically all these galaxies flying past each other at crazy speeds, to this dark energy.
Right. So here's the thing, is what it comes down to. On a cosmological level, and you can go listen to Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about this, they really don't know what the fuck they're talking about.
Yeah.
They're just guessing.
100%.
So with a scientific method, for everybody out there, basically what happened is they built a theory. They had a lot of funding and money coming in with the theory. And then they had a problem. Is mathematics showed that the theory was flawed at an energy constraint of 96%, which means that their theory worked for 5% of the things, but 95% of the things in their theory didn't work out. So instead of changing the theory, which logically that's what you do, they instead mathematically created something to fit into the theory to account for that 95%. I mean, that's absurdity. Seriously, that is absurdity. That's not how science is supposed to go. You're supposed to change the theory and now develop a new model based upon the mathematics, not develop mathematics to fit the old model.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how you have these people with these degrees and whatnot. That sounds good. And it wasn't too bad. But there's people that have these degrees, you know, and they disagree with each other. Oh, you know, one might say the universe is crunching up. The other says the universe is spreading apart. The others say, well, one day it's going to crunch up. And, you know, it's debated, even amongst the best scholars in the world.
So there's multiple cosmological theories out there right now. And even some fringe versions of the cosmological theory. I mean, you have plasma universe theory, you have electrical universe theory, which I'm a more privy to. You have the Big Bang theory, which is the prevailing one. You have superstring theory, where this is like people like Dr. Michio Kaku and so forth, and Dr. Green, Brian Greene, superstring theory.
Big Bang theory.
The Big Bang theory. This came.
I learned something interesting about that.
Go ahead. I want to hear about this.
So, basically, it has to do with the causal horizon, and the theory is that not only was there the Big Bang locally to us, which we traced back by looking at where things are moving and they all go back to one point, they say, well, there could be multiple instances of something like this happening based on how fast things are moving in the observable universe. Basically, we wouldn't know, like, we can't see past a certain point because objects in the universe could be moving faster than the speed of light relative to us, so the light would never get to us. So in a sense, that could be a different universe because we can't observe it.
And this is causal theory? Is this what you're saying?
This is causal. It's called the causal horizon. It's basically space is moving too fast for the light to make it back to us.
So what's the theoretical evidence that they have to actually substantiate that level of theory, other than mathematics?
I don't know.
So this is what I've always said about science is, can you build an entire house that can fit a human being in with 1 2x4, 397 nails, and 2 hammers?
I bet you could.
Well, can you? Does it make sense logically?
Oh, I mean, no. Not without shaving the
wood. But mathematically, you can.
Yeah.
And see, that's the thing.
Super thin sheet of wood.
That's right. Mathematically, we can develop it and make it work. Yeah. But
that's a good
logically,
analogy.
It doesn't work. And see, this is kind of what they did is, you know, you had the, it's called the, what's the not the Geneva interpretation. It's the big physics conference they had in the 1940s, where they determined the viewpoint of modern physics, the Heisenberg interpretation, or the whatchamacallit interpretation. Anyways,
I don't know.
What came out of this, and this was where all the big wigs went, is you had this Catholic physicist, priest, where I think he was Jewish. He was a rabbi or a priest, I don't remember. But he stands up and he gave the theory is that basically how the universe was created is through a Big Bang. That's kind of what he was referencing. Oh. Seriously. And it was a joke that stuck.
Oh, okay.
Right? That God inseminated the universe and it birthed. And so this is kind of where this Big Bang, the Copenhagen interpretation. Thank you. Copenhagen interpretation.
Nice, yeah.
And this is where the Big Bang Theory came about. Now, I want to kind of explain this because this is going to prevail to what dark matter and dark energy actually are. Now, here's the thing: is we got to remember that mass and energy. What really is mass and energy? What is matter? Let's define matter right now. What's matter?
Particles.
Okay. Substantiation. Something that has substantiation. Something that has a vector quantity that's measurable,
observable,
and observable. Right? Tangible. Measurable, observable, tangible. It's a vector, so it has magnitude and direction. Right?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. What's energy? How do you define energy?
Oh, geez.
Nope, this is okay, because that's exactly the response you want. Define energy. Define it.
Dude, I feel bad because I've told you this like 6 times.
Well, so there's multiple definitions of energy, but if we're looking for the scientific definition of energy, okay? And let's get it over here, because there's a Newtonian definition, right? So in physics, though, the property of matter and radiation, which is manifest as a capacity to perform work, such as causing motion, a causal effect of motion, or the interaction of molecules, a degree or level of energy possessed by something required for a process. Okay, so they define energy with matter, a property of matter. Okay, now think about this. Let's define matter in physics. Physical substance in general, as distinct from mind and spirit in physics, that occupies space and possesses rest mass, especially as distinct from energy.
Okay.
Okay. Distinct from energy.
Separate.
Now, what was Einstein's famous equation?
E equals mc squared.
What does that mean?
Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. What does it mean?
It means that mass compressed, okay? Mass compressed is energy. Now, do you see how this starts not to make any sense? As Einstein goes out there, establishes quantum physics. Max Planck, then Einstein. Einstein comes in, E equals mc squared. And so the actual equation isn't E equals mc squared. There's a lot more to the equation.
So is it basically, is what you're saying kind of that it's a rudimentary analysis of matter and energy?
No, what I'm saying is that they don't have a good definition, so they can't define it. And they won't define it until they can actually come up with a proper definition. And see, this is the thing, is they won't tell you this. Now, E equals mc squared is actually known as the mass energy equivalence factor. The actual equation, and I don't have the actual equation memorized, but I'm pretty sure I can pull it up, is E relative is equal to the square root of parentheses, the mass 0 times the speed of light squared to the second power plus the inertial reference frame times the speed of light squared. So there's a lot more to this than E equals mc squared. I know
That's interesting. Somebody in the chat says something that reminds me of something. They said this guy Cold Dust, we're 13. He says theoretically you could have energy from quarks and bosons, whatever those things were called. So yes, there is energy from these particles that people are discovering now. Quantum particles, right? The thing is, the amount of energy from dark matter...
Hold on a second. We're freezing up. My frame rate is all... Can you see me fine?
No, it's lagging.
Yeah. They must not like what we're talking about here, huh? Oh, I know why. I know why. Hold on, sorry.
Okay, the audio's clear.
There we go. I think that might have been why. Yep, that was why. My power went to low power mode because I was plugged into the wrong outlet. So I'm glad I figured that out. Okay, we should be good now. So yeah, so go ahead.
Hold
go
on.
ahead and explain.
So those quantum particles, they do have some of this energy attributed to them, but you would need 10 to the 100 and something power more energy to account for the phenomenon that's being observed. So it's not just that.
So okay, say that again.
So you have quarks and bosons and all these other particles, quantum particles, that are attributed some force.
Well, this is modern physics theory, right? Modern quantum theory is that a particle is representative of a subatomic particle, which is a derivative of some type of force or a motivator of a force.
But the entirety of the dark matter cannot be attributed to just that.
No, it can't.
It needs to be way more strong, powerful.
Right. But what I'm trying to do right now is we're trying to establish a baseline.
Yeah. So you're saying we can't even define.
Right.
This.
So basically what this is saying is Einstein said, okay, that energy, is equivalent to basically the square root of mass, right?
Okay.
Basically think about it as an inverse relationship of mass. If you could just take an inverse proportionality of mass, you would actually have energy moving at high rates of concentration. That's mass. That's what matter actually is. Matter is this formulation of energy coming into organization in sequence in collaborating with each other. That's really what matter is. Matter is nothing more than energy in coordination with each other. Sound familiar, right? Because here's the thing, is if we go back and we start defining matter, right?
Okay.
Which I don't think there's really a good definition. Let's do this. Define matter in physics. Let's see what physics says as the true definition. We were looking at the Britannica. In classical and general chemistry, matter is any substance that has mass and takes up space by having volume. Kind of what we were saying. It has a two-vector quantity. All everyday objects can be touched or ultimately composed of atoms, which are made up of interacting subatomic particles. And in everyday as well as scientific usage, matter generally includes atoms and anything made up of them, and any particles or combination of particles that act as if they have both rest mass and volume. Okay. So all mass is energy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But not all energy is matter.
And one thing that helps me conceptualize this is thinking about atomic structure and atoms and electrons and protons, and that everything is just made up of these, just in different numbers. So yes, it's all the same stuff essentially. Okay,
but here's the thing, is when they define energy, right, in physics. Now let's define it as Wikipedia says. In physics, energy is a quantitative property. Okay? Quantitative being a property of a material or a system that can be quantified by measurement. Okay? Quantitative property that must be transferred to a body or physical system to perform work in that body or system or to heat it.
Energy, okay.
Okay, that's energy. So, knowing that and knowing what we just defined as energy, how do you define them? Is matter is nothing more than the concentrated ability to do work. That's how physics is defining matter. It's nothing more than the ability of a system to do work in an organized form. Where energy is just the ability to do work. So what is it? It's not defined. They're defining each other with a definition of each other on a quantitative relationship. They're just saying energy is a quantitatively a measured, observable relevance, right? It's something that produces heat or movement or something. It's something that produces action or motion. Whereas matter is the thing that is going to be moved or that's going to produce heat, but in a sense is nothing more than the movement itself. It's a conundrum. It's a paradox.
Yeah.
And I urge everybody to go out and start looking at these scientific definitions because they don't make sense. And so here's the thing is, how do you define energy?
Matter's ability to do work, or the work that happens.
Motion. Anything that produces any vector, any force that produces motion. So that means it's all forces, right? So energy is all forces, and is it the absence of all forces?
I don't think you could have matter without some type of energy.
Well, see, here's the problem, though, is go back to the Big Bang. The Big Bang, prior to the Big Bang, you had all energy and matter condensed to a slow vibration of about a pea-sized particle, right?
According to the theory.
According to the theory.
Yes.
In this pea-sized particle, none of the current laws of the universe existed. Instead, it existed in, I think it's called a hadron. It's a hadron-like plasma. So basically, it's this very, very weak electromagnetic force that has no other laws pertaining to it, where everything is in this plasmoid form, right? And this is kind of, they actually recreated this substance right now at CERN, supposedly. But they do it through high energy collision.
Yeah.
But here's the problem is they can't recreate something that has no laws surrounding it of the universe in a universe that has the laws surrounding it.
Yeah, you have that paradox of observing and...
There you go. So when they say this, it's mathematical, kind of like the house that we just talked about them building.
I want to learn more about the sensors they're using, man, because metrology isn't easy. I don't know, man. It's hard for me to believe that they're gathering really concrete data.
I agree.
Tiny things.
Now, I know you're not staying with us all night, but let me get through the Big Bang here.
Okay.
So the Big Bang, okay, this thing is this plasmoid that has no laws. There's no gravity. There's no magnetism. There's this very weak, what we call QED theory, quantum electrodynamic relationship between the plasmoids. But there's no gravity. There's no strong force. There's no weak force, right? None of the forces of nature that we know of actually exist at this point. Something happens, which, by the way, has not been defined. They don't know what it is. Something happened, okay? And everything just goes boom, like this. And within the first 1/1,000,000th of a second, this plasmoid expands to half of the current size of our universe, 6.7 billion light years. If you're doing the math there, yes, that is faster than the speed of light. Way faster than the speed of light. And the reason that happened is because there's no laws. Gravity wasn't at play. There's no strong force and there's no weak force. So there's no laws of the universe, so it could move faster than the speed of light because the speed of light wasn't established at that point in time. This is the fucking logic of modern day cosmology. I'm not joking with you.
Whoa.
Okay? So the first millionth of a second, bloop, goes like that. And then gravity automatically kicks in. By the way, they haven't defined the medium of expansion. No. They don't know what this is it's expanding into. That's not defined.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I guess the theory is dark energy expands it, but then what is it expanding into?
Right.
Infinity?
Well.
Of what?
Right. So, okay. So you have this 1/1,000,000th, all of a sudden gravity kicks in. Now, gravity kicks in because all of a sudden it falls into the God particle, or, the boson field, and everything gets mass at that same time, and gravity kicks in. And so they say at that point in time, gravity kicks in, everything goes and starts coalescing and starts rotating while continuously expanding. Now, I have to go back to Newtonian physics to understand this. An object in motion stays in motion unless acted upon by a net or resultant force. Okay, so they're saying that the resultant force is gravity that take hold, which puts the brakes on the expansion of the universe. It continues to expand, but everything starts to coalesce and starts to rotate around each other, and gravity starts formulating, and things start coming together, and the first subatomic Planck's length particles start formulating the first subquantum particles. Now, here's the problem. Let's say that we're taking this Big Bang, okay? And let's say that it happens instantaneously. Right? Yep. Now, this is a plasmoid, so this has shape, it has magnitude, it has direction, even though there's no forces there. There is something there. There is construct. This construct, we can assume, has various different interdimensional layers. So whatever's expanding it has to expand in a uniform fashion, obviously outward edges first and then moving inward on a dimensional level of expansion, correct?
Sure.
Now, if there's only one force of propulsion, explosion, that is propelling it outwardly, this means that everything in that force, everything that is in that substance, is expanding outwardly at the same rate of expansion, right?
Okay.
But here's the problem. Is that's a very decreasing varying degree of expansion. What do I mean by that? Is the outside is going to be the fastest level of expansion. As those interdimensional levels become inward towards the center of the structure, the power of the explosion is going to decrease in magnitude, right? Because of that. This is why when you see an explosion happen, everything flies out really fast, and then you have those little things that go, right? Because the things that are last to be affected by the shock wave or the original explosion are affected by the least amount of energy of the initial type of explosion. Also, you have reverberation waves. You have all these other things that are occurring because of this. So, what we see here is this, is that the universe is expanding. Now, let's imagine this is expanding in an infinite space. This is their theory, not mine. So, if I have object A and object B, and they begin expanding, they're moving away from each other.
Yeah.
At a massively high rate of speed in an infinite space. This means that all points of this plasmoid are moving away from each other instantaneously at an ever-increasing rate. Object in motion stays in motion unless acted upon by a net force in an infinite space with no laws or principles or rules of the universe. So tell me how gravity all of a sudden takes effect and coalesces it and starts to take over. Because gravity is the distal relationship between two masses.
Right, so theoretically gravity should dissipate and then be non-existent.
Theoretically, is gravity should have never happened. Period. It can't. Not in this theory of universal expansion from one singular point of explosion. Okay. That's a brain fuck. That's a lot for a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
So we're like, okay, we're thinking about this, contrapolating in our mind. Okay, everything's expanding outward from each other in an infinite space. Everything is moving away. If you're moving away, gravity, that means, even if it took force, is getting weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. So they say after 1/1,000,000th of a second, though, all of a sudden gravity, it's like it ran in to the God particle or the boson field, right? Now, here's the thing. This means that the boson field must have been existent prior on the outskirts in the infinite expansion, or came into play during certain dynamics of the expansion process. Now, have they explained this? No. They just say that the laws of the universe come into play. Voila, they're there. 1/1,000,000th of a second. Ha! They appear. Now, these are the same people that criticize Christians and God.
For not having evidence?
For not having evidence, for basically making broad assumptions, all this shit. And this is their theoretical model. So, as you can tell, none of this really makes sense. But now, if you start to put in dark matter into the equation, now what they're saying is, well, what happened is that you have this 5% material universe that's expanding in this dark matter universe, and it was the dark energy force that basically brought the laws into motion and started to slow everything down. So, here's the problem, is none of this explains or can be attached. And this is the big problem that we have right now. And this is what the Copenhagen interpretation did. Is it separated Newtonian physics and quantum physics in cosmology. And so we don't have a working theory that aligns Newtonian physics, which is basically the rocket science and these types of things, quantum physics, and obviously Einstein's light and gravitational theory, and then bringing it together for a cosmological theory. So our quantum, our macro, and our cosmological theories of physics do not align.
They're all separate.
They're all separate. So you'd think, maybe it's time for a new theory.
Yeah.
So the question is if it is time for a new theory, right, then how should this theory go? How should we start to build it or put it together? Well, if we know that 95% of the energy, firstly, we need to define matter and energy. Now,
Redefine,
correct. And so when I started looking into this many years ago, and I had been well-versed on the esoteric knowledge on the mystery schools for a very long time, and so I had a hermetic perspective coming into this of, the universe is mind, everything is all mind. So I took that in context in defining matter and energy. Now, energy, we have something in thermodynamics known as the law of conservation of energy. And this principle is true even to the beginnings of the Big Bang Theory. Now, do you know what the law of conservation of energy states?
you cannot create or destroy matter.
Right, that matter can neither be created nor destroyed, only transferred from one medium to another, okay, through a difference of potential, a high to a low. Universal law. Basically what this means is if I have hot water and I have cold water, energy will start to flow between the hot water and the cold water until you get lukewarm water between the two that is matching room temperature. Okay? So everything will basically stabilize in the sense. And so we always thought that this was like an entropic law, right? That the universe is moving towards a level of chaos or disorganization to its lowest energy state, right?
So yeah, and that kind of reminds me of like after the Big Bang, they say the molecules with less electrons and protons were created first, and then the more complex ones came later.
Mm-hmm.
So this is kind of the opposite of that, or the other end of that.
Right. So basically we have entropy, which is everything is moving towards a state of low energy state, right? Everything is moving to ground. And so in electricity, you have an electrical current that flows to ground. It wants to be distributed and it wants to be neutralized and it doesn't want to exist. It wants to be zero. But I started looking at the universe and I said, we can see it in systems that we develop, closed systems, right? But is that really what's happening? Are systems really moving to the lowest points? Are they disassociating themselves? Right? Is matter breaking apart, breaking down, and returning all of its elements into the ground and, relinquishing all of its energy down to its basal state? No, absolutely not. See, we think about this because we see a leaf fall onto the ground and it decays, and all those that carbon molecules, the hydrocarbons, begin to break down and they go back into the ground, and we think that, it's just giving its energy back to the earth. This is a very old paganistic version of decay, and this is where entropic theories come from, is that everything breaks down to its very, very basic form, and that energy is given back in that sense. But is that really what happens? Are any of those molecules sustained? Does everything break down to just carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen?
No.
No, it doesn't. It breaks down to a stabilized form. To a form that is optimized for its energy state. So, in the environment that it's in, the leaf falls onto the ground. The ground is formulated with massive amounts of hydrocarbons and organic life forms. The leaf begins to break down to match the resonant structure of that new system that it has just entered. It optimizes with the system. It doesn't break down to its basal energy state, which is a completely different way of thinking.
Interesting.
So, let's think about this. If that's what's really happening in the sense of the conservation of energy, open systems and closed systems, that energy is simply adapting to its surrounding system, that everything is a relationship between two systems. Right? So, what does the law of conservation of energy state?
That it's a...
Energy's neither created nor destroyed. Always been there, so it's a continuous state that's in various functions of flow. That there is no increase or decrease of energy within the system. It's a constant energy state, except that energy state exists in different variations of flow. Okay? That energy is neither created nor destroyed, we just talked about, but it is only transferred, or what we call transmuted in alchemy. Okay? From one state to another, a high to a low. This is the same thing in electrical potential, what we call a difference of potential. Is I have to have a low potential and a high potential in order for energy to flow back and forth. Right? Okay. So, now think about this. Is if energy, right, this thing that we're talking about, conservation of energy, right, can only transmutate. What does transmutate mean?
I think of like chemical processes or exchanging
dissolution.
Elements changing.
Yeah, dissolution. It's like burning a fire, going in there, creating a catalyst reaction, having the wood, which is a hydrocarbon, turn into gases and carbon.
Yeah.
Right? That's returning back to this basal state by catalytic reaction. Okay?
Or even like particles decaying.
That's right. We transmute back to the basal elements. Or we can transmute something into something new. Right? Okay. So, like, for instance, can you change the functionality of your mind? Can you change the shape of your brain through neuroplasticity?
Kinda, I
Yeah,
think.
absolutely you can. And you're transmuting. Okay, what you're doing is you're taking, let's say that you're taking a flashlight of energy and changing it into a bottle of water. You're changing the vibrational construction of one thing to a vibrational construction of another. You're changing the pattern of vibration.
And it's like, theoretically, you have all the ingredients, the same amount of matter and energy required.
This is alchemy.
Yeah.
So transmutation
is the Philosopher's Stone or something?
Yeah. Well, transmutation is the art of the master. And this is when you take one vibrational substance, which is just the basic basal units, elements of the universe, and changing it into that which you desire. And so in alchemy, we utilize this with basically the spirit, the mind, and the body. But in reality, when we're talking about the construction of reality, nature does this all the time. We are the remnant of an old star's destruction. That's transmutation. We were once heavy elements within a star, and now those heavy elements are now composed within us. From millions and millions of stars throughout the existence of the universe are now composed of different molecules and atoms within us. They took on a different vibrational shape, different vibrational architecture and construct. That's transmutation. So that is the process. And this only happens when energy, a system of energy, comes in relation to another system of energy. And that is the foundry basis of conservation of energy. Energy has to have a difference of potential. There has to be a high state and a low state. If you have two equivalent states, you have equilibrium and balance.
Yeah. Where do you ever see that?
Well, you see it a lot, actually. You see it a lot in the universe. And the reason you see it a lot in the universe is because we don't understand what it actually is. It's homeostasis. It's balance. It's the dance the universe does. What I mean by that is that 95% of the universe that they consider dark matter or dark energy is actually in a state of homeostasis. It's in a state of optimization. It's in a state of balance. And the way to explain this is I go back and I explain constructive and destructive interference of wave theory. If I have a transmitter and a receiver, I have one transmitter and receiver sending a signal out, okay? 20 hertz.
Okay.
And I take another transmitter next to the receiver, and they're parallel to each other, right? Or not parallel, they're facing each other. So I'm transmitting one this way and I'm transmitting the other this way. And I take one and I turn it 180 degrees out of phase. Okay? Those two waves cancel each other out and they're non-detectable. There's nothing measurable there. Gone. But let me ask you this. The transmitter still transmitting?
Yes.
Is there energy to be putting into the system?
Yeah.
Are they still receiving?
Yes.
But is anything between them?
No.
And it's disappeared, completely gone.
Disappeared, yeah.
Right. Now, if you take another wave and you shoot it perpendicular to it, does it produce interference with those two waves?
Yeah.
It does.
Dude, I want to do this experiment myself one day.
Okay. So now think about this. What happened to those two waves that are 180 degrees out of phase? We say that they disappeared. They're gone. They're zero. Are they zero? Or are they at a state of optimization? Well, we have to understand what's creating mass or energy, or what we understand is mass and energy. We've been talking about a lot about vibration. We've been talking a lot about frequency, right? Yeah. So, right now, imagine for a moment that Michelson and Morley were right, that J.J. Thomson, the guy who discovered the electron, was correct, that all these pre-20th century physicists were correct on their assumptions that there was such a thing as a medium or construct known as the ether. And basically this is just a medium of propagation. And so for everybody understanding that is when I make noise with my vocal cords, this vibrates air, and the air molecules go out in what's called a compression wave, which is very similar to a longitudinal wave, and they go out and they compress air like this. And that vibrates bones in my ear when that compresses, that compression, that smacking back and forth, vibrates bones in my ears, which send electrical signaling to my brain and produce language. Okay? But that happens through a medium. And there's a theory that, and this is interesting to say, is that you can't speak in space. That sound vibration just turns into heat and is lost when you try to speak in space because there's no medium of propagation. Mm-hmm. It's just actually the medium of propagation isn't suitable for compression waves. And the reason is because the medium of propagation, the primary force, the primary mover, whatever you want to call it, is that existent state of optimization of what we just experienced with the two waves.
So that exists everywhere? Or I'm not
so
following.
It is everything. It is the only thing that is actually in existence is this field. Okay? So imagine for a minute that there is only in existence a field of potential. And this potential exists at a state of optimization, which we can call zero, but is not actually zero. It has a high vibrational energy density. What do I mean by that? Is let's say that those two waves were 20 hertz. It's at optimization at 20 hertz resonance. Right? Those two waves are still vibrating at 20 hertz. The waves are still there. They're just optimized at 20 hertz. So imagine that this construct is 180 degrees out of phase. Basically, it came to a point of optimization, a point of low entropy, where
Which is why we can't sense it.
We can't sense it. We can't see it. We can't detect it. We don't even know it's there until it becomes perturbed. Perturbed means that you go into some type of vibrational state and you produce interference.
Yes.
Okay. Now, this is what I want everybody to think about. We've always been led to believe that the forces of the universe are what produce the effects that we see in the universe. For instance, that light is a limiting constraint at a velocity of travel of a small, minute particle through the universe called a photon. That the photon is actually the thing that is moving through space. That if a photon of light is moving from the sun to the earth, you see no light actually in space because there is nothing actually illuminating that photon. It is only when that photon is observed does that actually come into context or relevance. Okay. Now, this is where it gets interesting. What is actually happening? Are these little things that make up 5% of the universe called particles? Or is what a particle is that perpendicular waveform that is shooting through that point of optimization. If I have those two waves 180 degrees out of phase, and there's zero, nothingness, and then all of a sudden I have another wave coming perpendicular, an energy perturbation, another oscillation, a distortion, if you want to call it, and it interrupts that field, what does that field do?
Both react.
It interacts as interference. So think about it, the best way, as an ocean, a still ocean of water. Complete stillness. Has massive amounts of potential stored energy, but it's still no movement. Then we take a rock and we drop the rock in the ocean. What happens with the ocean water?
Ripples.
It ripples out. Boom, 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 boom. Now that ripple is the distribution of the amount of energy produced by the distortion that entered the water. Right? Mm-hmm. Now, the rock is falling down in the ocean and it's producing what we call a bow shock, right? So you have a bow shock and you have a teardrop that forms after it. Now, is the rock producing the bow shock?
Not really. Depends how you look at it.
Gravity's produced in the bow shock, right? The relationship between the rock and the mass of a body of Earth is the relationship between them two is producing a pulling sensation. So the rock.
I think there's a lot that comes into play with that scenario.
There is.
It's definitely gravity. Yeah.
Okay. So it's not actually the rock that is producing the movement. It's a force that's external to the rock that is developed because of the rock's relationship with the rock and the earth that produces this movement, this motion, which perturbs the field. Okay, now, let me ask you this. Once the rock enters the ocean, what happens to the volume of the ocean?
It increases by the amount of the rock.
100%. Which means that The rock isn't only pushing on the ocean is pushing on the
rock.
And what is the force that the ocean pushes on the rock at?
Gravity.
Well,
resistance.
The
water.
The same equal, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So it's the same equivalent force that the rock pushes on the ocean. Yeah. So the same amount of displacement that the rock is pushing on the ocean is pushing back on the rock. That's how it compensates for the exchange of volume. Okay? Now imagine this. With no forces existing in the universe. Imagine that there's this field that we'll just call the ocean. Okay? And that there's a distortion moving through the field. Okay? We're going to call distortion the rock.
Okay.
What happens to the field?
Same kind of effect.
It ripples out. It expands, right? It increases its volume. It separates. Okay? Now, if this field is what we know of today as energy, right? If it's basically 0 point energy, right? And that we have two waves, right? We have two 20 hertz waves. Let's say that it's like, 1 amp a current or whatever, right? And now there's nothing there. All of a sudden, we separate it and the waves come back. Now, do they have electrical potential? We can detect them now. We can see them. We have the energy come back into play. So when this field perturbation comes through, when this distortion comes through the field separates and produces what? Electromagnetism. We have polarization of energy. The field separates, and all of a sudden we see electromagnetism come into play. The first thing that happens is we have polarization of the fields. We have a positive and a negative field, and electromagnetism comes into play. Now, naturally, that field wants to do what?
Collapse.
It wants to go back to zero, because you remember that rock's moving through the water, right? And you have the teardrop shape. And the teardrop shape is actually the water coming back together. So what happens in the sky when you have a low energy system and a high energy system? When positive and negative particles starts moving, they start developing a capacitance level, and then all of a sudden that barrier between them collapses. You get thunder, and you get lightning. You get lightning that's produced. So when you separate two polarized objects, one positive, one negative, you have a capacitance that builds up. When the capacitance comes down to a breaking point and discharges, you have what we call light. Now, is it the rock creating the light, or is it the field?
Both.
No. So we tend to believe that the photon is traversing the medium, and the photon is what we perceive as light. In actuality, what's happening is what we perceive as light, as the energy actually given off by a photon, is the collapsing of the field as the actual photon is moving through it.
Oh, so we're not seeing the photon, you're seeing the field collapse.
So the field collapsing, the point where the field comes back together. Remember, the field separates, that's electromagnetism. Okay, that's positive and a negative charge. And that means that when that teardrop comes to the point of collapse, you're going to have a discharge of energy. That's a photon. That's actually what's happening. And which means that there's a propagator, a force, a primal force that's moving through, a perturbation, a distortion in the field that's undetected, that we're not seeing, that's moving through the field, that's producing this. There's a rock moving through the field that we're not seeing, that we're not detecting. Guess what that rock is?
A photon.
Dark energy. Dark matter. Not only that, is the field and all of its untapped potential is dark matter. Dark energy. So this even gets better. Now the field separates. Okay? Now you remember the rock is pushing back, or the ocean is pushing back on the rock, so the field is pushing back on the perturbation. Is that a one-sided force? Is that an attractive one-sided force that is unidirectional towards the center of an object? In all directions?
Yeah.
Absolutely, 100%. If I put an object, a big old bowling ball in the middle of a jello mold in a non-gravitational state, it's going to displace all the volume around that jello mold, as well as the jello mold is going to push back on the bowling ball in all directions equivalent. And now, the further out I go from that bowling ball, the less the force is that's pushing back on the bowling ball. But the force is always directed towards the center of the mass, displacing the medium. What does that sound like?
The force is always equal to the mass displacing the medium.
Einsteinian gravitational theory. That gravity is nothing but a distortion of space-time. In actuality, the problem is we always look at 1- and 2-dimensional models when we're trying to describe Einsteinian gravitational theory, right? So they show the bowling ball, and they put it on the trampoline and displaces the trampoline, but you have to look at it in a 3-dimensional or 4-dimensional perspective of actually traversing time, which means that you would actually have to put the bowling ball in a jello mold with no gravitational field outside of it, and you would see the jello mold displace outward as well as push inward towards the bowling ball, in all directions simultaneously towards the center of the mass that's displacing it. That's gravity. And the gravity's relation, this is our gravitational constant, is not with other planets, because you do have this relationship with other planets, because if I put another bowling ball in that same jello mold, now you're going to have an increased attractive force between the displacement of those two objects. That makes sense, because we're displacing volume of the medium. Okay? But the actual relationship of gravity is the displacement of the original field tensor, the primal field tensor, which is known as the ether. And so what you have here is we're bringing about all the forces of the universe in a unified field without big bangs, without quantum electrodynamic theory, without all this other stuff. And we're explaining it very simply and very easily.
Yeah. People like to have a beginning, middle, and end to a story, though.
That's right.
How did it start? But, yeah.
Well, how about this? Our minds can't understand or comprehend start and finish, per se. But let's just imagine that it's always existed.
Yeah.
Right? So let's just...
If it's infinite, why couldn't it have always existed?
Well, it has to. I think time is a linear measurement. So what if that the only thing that does exist is the moment, and everything is a continuation of the moment in the entirety of existence? So I want everybody to think about this for a minute. So we kind of established some groundwork basis. So getting into the strong and the weak forces of the universe, this takes a little bit more explanation. You have to understand duality. So imagine that, and I guess we'll get into this right now real quick. I know if you want to go, you can go. I can just keep on going with this. But
I got a little bit.
Okay.
For a little bit.
Okay, so instead of the Big Bang Theory, imagine that we have something called optimized theory. Imagine that the universe in its very primal existence existed as those two waves canceling each other out. Okay?
Right, and that being the ether?
That being one ether.
Okay.
Okay, that being one ether. And let's say that existed at a number 1. We'll just say a value, a quantity. Let's quantify it. A quantity of 1. Okay? And this exists as an energy storage system of 1 that is in complete optimized form, just like those two transmitters and receivers with nothing detectable in between. It's nothing. It's nothingness. It's the closest we can define as nothingness, but it has a source, a primal source of energy that is equivalent to 1, quantitatively. Okay? And this is floating in the abyss of the infinite. That is the same thing, except it's trying to do the same thing. It's trying to come down to this point of optimization. And let's say that there's other ones of these out there that are in the same points of optimization. So, like we're saying is we have these two waves, 20 hertz, one inverse out of phase, 180 degrees out of phase. And then we have another one that's 21 hertz. And they're 180 degrees out of phase and so forth. And they're floating around in their nothingness. What happens when they start to meet?
They begin to interact.
They begin to produce distortion and interference patterns within them. Now, what did we define in this ether field that we just talked about as a distortion?
As the distortion?
Matter.
Ah. Okay.
So the matter is a distortion in the ether field. So when these two things come together, that point of convergence produces what?
Matter.
All of a sudden... Because it's the combining
that
of...
makes sense.
Oh. So now you have these two fields that are nothingness. They interact, okay? And all of a sudden, the whole field goes, whoa, what just happened? Now you have a 1 and a 2, and they start moving to an optimization point of 1.5. And so everything starts to interact, to move, right? Two systems coming in relation, exchanging energy from a high system to a low, the law of conservation of energy, and transmuting everything now to its new basal state, which would be a new state of optimization where those frequencies can now go back to that 0 state.
I don't know, though, because things are hyper and things calm down and get hyper again.
In the universe.
In the universe.
Right. But now put into the context of what we're talking about here, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have this one energy state, 1.5. It's an optimization. Yeah. We have this one that's 1 and it's an optimization. They merge. Vesica Pisces, 2 circles intersecting, and you have this football shape. Vesica Pisces. At the center of the Vesica Pisces, that's now. That is the moment. That is the point of convergence. That is the only point in existence in reality right now. That point.
Interesting.
Now, everything outside of that is still moving to optimization is...
Another dimension, dude.
No, think about this. Is as that rock falls through the water, okay, the trail, the ripples are producing perturbations in the field, which collapse and produce light. So, when they say that the speed of light is a limit, and we're actually looking at planets and stars that are billions of years old in the sky, what they're actually telling us, okay, is that reverberation, that ripple in the ocean took billions of years to come here and collapse the field to produce the light. In actuality, so when we're looking out there, everything else that's happening outside of that point of convergence is those vibrations, those ripples of the universe. This is why, because this is the one thing that we didn't cover just a second ago, is when that field collapses and produces light, a photon, okay, what is the rate of collapse?
The speed of light.
That's why it's always constant. Because the speed of light is directly related to gravitational force and is directly related to electromagnetism. The separation...
That's why it's in Einstein's formula.
That's right. And that's why the separation of the ether medium is polarized, electromagnetic forces, right? And the medium itself is actually pulling back towards itself in a gravitational constant, which means that the rate at which electromagnetism and gravity work together is the speed of light.
Interesting. Well, damn. I had a great conversation. I got to call it a night, but thank you.
No problem, man. We're going to continue the talk. I'm going to bring up my chat here, and hopefully some people want to talk about this a little bit more.
All right. Take care. I'll talk to y'all soon.
All right, Vince. Be well, my friend. Take care.
Bye.
And my chat didn't come up for some reason. All right. How are we all doing tonight? There's my chat. I was wondering where my chat was. My chat had disappeared on me. Now it's just me and you guys, man. What are we going to talk about here? What should we talk about here? This is a pretty interesting conversation. So Don Maga asks, aren't there theories that light can travel at different speeds and can fold? Yes, but this always happens when light is dependent on a secondary medium of propagation. Whether it's moving through some type of bismuth crystalline structure or whatever, light can be slowed down and sped up. But all this tells us is that the greater the distortion, the more organized the construct of distortion, the slower that field perturbation can actually rebalance itself. This is actually fit with this whole theory. Now, if we go back into that point of convergence, okay, what did we just say there? We said that we had one universe over here that was at optimization, one over here that was optimization, one at a higher energy state, one at a lower energy state. And they come and they meet at a point of convergence. Well, when that happens, okay, you're going to have energy start interacting at that point of convergence, right? So you have, boom, you have all these energies start to be formulated and forming, right? You have distortions in this field that creates this imbalance. At the time that happens, it produces what we know of as space. But also at the time that space is created, you get what you called counter space. right? Because you have to have the dualistic nature of the universe's formation. This is very understanding that when a ripple, right, that a ripple that is created in the water doesn't only travel in one way. It doesn't create a positive waveform, but also creates the negative waveform. That everything exists within a dualistic structure. So if you have a positive distribution of space, you're going to have a negative convergence of space. An explosion will cause an implosion somewhere else. Now, when we get into the strong nuclear force, or what an actual hydrogen atom is, right? So if we just went down to the nucleus of an atom and said, well, what is this thing? Well, in actuality, what that is a minor perturbation within this ethereal field at that point of convergence that is moving to optimization with its counterpart in counter space, which is not an expansive field, but an implosive field. So it's interdimensionally enclosed instead of expanded. And so the strong nuclear force is actually this oscillation between space and counter space, which keeps that nucleus of an atom at its vibration while it moves to a neutralized state very, very far on down the road. And basically those nucleuses of an atom would be vibrating at the optimized state of the new convergent energy state. So if we're got a 1 and a 2, we'd be looking at a 1.5. Pretty cool stuff, huh? I don't know. I like talking physics. I like this kind of stuff. I've had this theory for a long time. I've dealt with this theory for a very long time. I've thought about it for a very long time. And what you come to understand is that in the universe, right, there might be this very, very expansive and complex formulation of how the universe actually is and what it actually is. And I would say that that's bullshit, because we have to go towards ox and razors, that most likely the simplest and most logical solution is always going to be the right one. Which means that, wouldn't it be interesting if the universe was very, very simple? And that understanding it is not looking at the complexity of how it has evolved to this point, but instead of going to the beginning of point before complexity emerged. And understanding that the universe simply is one process repeated over and over and over continuously. And this one process is nothing more than two systems of energy coming together and exchanging energy and moving to a point of optimization. System 1 at a high energy, System 2 at a low energy, and they come together on a very, very small micro level, Planck's length level maybe, on a very simplistic version of the universe where nothing else exists except for these two perturbations, these two distortions, these two vibrations. They come together, they meet, they come in relation with each other, and energy starts exchanging from a high state to a low state, and that forms a new emergent system. System A, System B come together, high, low, come together, form a new third system called an emergent system that's only in existence because those two systems decide to come in relation, and they come to a balanced form of energy. Right? Where if I have a quantitative value of 1 and a quantitative value of 2, 1 plus 2 is 3, divided by 2 is 1.5. Right? So now I have a new emergent system that exists at energy potential quantitative measurement of 1.5, but it's a new oscillatory boundary. It's a different system. It's a third system that's emergent from the prior two. Now let's say that this system, very simple logic, goes about throughout the universe and just continues the same process over and over and over and over again. Why? Because it's trying to obtain a continuous energy state to where it can become in a neutral energy form, in a optimized or in a homeostatic energy form. And the way it does this is by producing more complex and intelligent structured systems. Just like it did. Two systems come together, they come to this 1.5. This emergent system now goes out, meets another system, it produces this, it comes to a more medium energy system, but now a more complex structure. This complex structure goes out, merges with another complex structure. This system goes out, merges with another complex system, and this occurs over and over and over again. And this happens for billions of years until you find these complex systems, these highly intelligent and complex systems of energy formulate what we have here today. You, me, and everybody else, and planets, and galaxies, and systems. And what are we? We are nothing but highly complex and organized systems of energy exchanging energy. Me talking, that's energy exchange. Knowledge and information, thought, that's energy exchange. Everything we do is energy exchange. It's the same process over and over and over and over again, formulating new complex and intelligent structures of energy, which moving to a new state or system of optimization. And so what I say dark matter is, and what dark energy is this ethereal, this ether construct, this field in existence. And dark matter is these perturbations within this field, this convergence zone of these two universes colliding. I think you guys are like lost and moved on with a different conversation. I'm sorry. I'm looking at the chat and you guys are like, be fruitful and multiply. Yep, systems made it and had a baby. That's right. It's the ultimate trinity. It's exactly what it is, the ultimate trinity. Where did the original unbalance come from and why not complete balance forever? That's a great question. Where did the original unbalance come from? Well, if you go back in esotericism, mystery schools, mythology, and early religious philosophy, you find out, and let's just take the Vedas for instance, that Brahma breathed the original perturbation, that he Om, the original word. In the beginning was the word, and the word was actually logos, and logos is vibration, right? The beginning was the first vibration. Now think about this context of what I'm explaining to you in this theory. Is that Om was the first word spoken. In the beginning was the word. The word is vibration. The vibration was actually logos. Logos is this context of vibrational significance. So the first unbalance was the word. Which we go back to esotericism, hermeticism, we find out that was just a thought in the mind of the creator, because we're all just a thought in the mind of the creator, which means that the construct, the ether, all of it, is nothing more than consciousness. And that's why they don't define it and they can't define it. Because everything is consciousness. Everything is composed of consciousness. And this has to be if you understand physics down to its core. Because if we go to the double slit experiment, the observer phenomena, all this stuff, we have to understand in order for one thing to exist in a non-wave dualistic form, it has to be observed. So before humanity ever existed in the universe, how is the universe even there? If it was all probabilistic, how did it all come together unless it was being observed? This means that the universe itself has to observe the universe itself. This means that the water bottle has a very, very low state of observance of the universe environment around it. Everything is built upon consciousness. Consciousness is everything. Everything is thought energy, is derived from thought energy. The whole field, all the energy structure that we just talked about is thought energy, because it has to be observed by something else of itself. Can't exist without it. Everything would be a mere potentiality. It would be in the realm of non-existence if it was not. Like Biden. Exactly, like Biden. Very cool. I tend to like these discussions. I could typically go on for hours and hours on end. Hopefully that got a lot of minds tired for this Insomniac night and not stimulated. Marilyn Monroe. Hi, Marilyn. I'm glad to find that you have come back to our world. She's saying, so everything is alive. No, everything is conscious. Alive is a state where consciousness comes into physical being and possesses matter and making it animate, in my opinion. But everything is conscious, which is aware. Aware and alive, I would say, are two different things. Lauren, you're right. I do need a whiteboard. Wait. Yay, what's up? What's up, Yay? Let's hear it. And the observation alone changes it. 100%. And we're on a 10-second delay, so I gotta wait 10 seconds for Ye to come back. That's all good. This is a cool conversation, though. Depending on the temp of explosion, it creates different particles, correct? We're talking about a whole different realm of understanding. Basically, what they're doing is they're taking energy and colliding energy into a field and seeing what it does. I wouldn't even... Yeah, everything is energy. And all energy is consciousness. I was waiting for it. Unobservable. You know, I like it in the paradoxical discussions in the sense of paradoxical discussions about absoluteness and nothingness and eternity and infinite. You know, one thing that I've always perceived in the world is, let's say you have a task to do or you have an obstacle in front of you. Always perceive it as a finite system. Because it is. There's always going to be an end to whatever you're doing with that system. And so when you understand that you're an infinite being operating in a finite system, your whole world changes. You can create anything you want to create. You can do anything you want to do. So the Deb556 says, so in simplest form of explanation, is that energy and gravity is love. No. I would disagree with that. Nothing wrong. I'm disagreeing with that. I define love as the primary source of consciousness, the force behind consciousness, I believe, is one word, and it's a unidirectional force. It's the only unidirectional force in existence other than gravity and the physical forces, but this would be in the mental forces. And that is gratitude. Gratitude is a unidirectional force. It is something that is exerted by conscious energy that has no recourse of exchange. This means that I'm giving you something and I don't want anything in return for it. Could care less about getting anything in return to it. I'm showing appreciation for you, your being, for the universe, or for whatever it might be, for my water bottle, for my dog, my cat, and I don't want anything back from you for that. That's gratitude. Singular in direction. Now, love is this, and we have to get back into the mental perspective of understanding what Buddha was trying to tell us. See, I can only control my mind, my thoughts, my destiny, my actions, and my influences. So everything that happens up here creates an action or an influence in my reality of which I am in control of, and I have to face the consequences or the rewards for. That makes sense. Okay, let's say I have a child. I can't control the actions and the influences that that child has in reality. That produces a state of doubt. That produces a state of fear, of undefinition. I don't know what their actions and influences are going to produce because I can't control what's happening in their mind. Okay? That's attachment. Attachment is the definition, is the undefinition of uncertainty. Okay? Is I'm attached to someone or something simply because I don't know what their state of future being is going to be, and that scares the shit out of me. So love, as I define it, is gratitude with attachment to expectation. And it's something that we on this conscious level go through. But I would not say that love is the primordial emotion or force of the universe. I would completely disagree with that. Gratitude, I would say, is. Because Buddha always tried to tell us what? Live without attachment. Attachment wasn't necessarily that I really like this thing. It was the attachment to outcomes that are outside of the realm of control that are dictated by what he would consider, or what they would consider, Maya illusion. And that is the illusion of perception, the illusion of how reality is actually created. Don Maga says, do you believe the stories that Jesus studied with the Buddha Well, you're probably talking about the story of Isa, how Isa traveled the Silk Road. He went to India, Nepal, he went to China, and he studied with many, many enlightened beings, and he came back to Israel as a bodhisattva, which means becoming a Buddha. And he started teaching the Israelites Buddhism. And then he was killed because of that. And then the Israelites supposedly took him on a Mecca up to Nepal, where his feet were cast in the stone and stored at a temple where all bodhisattvas' feet are stored. And this was actually found in a 2nd century Gnostic Christian temple just outside of Jerusalem on papyrus scripts by a Russian archaeologist in 1963. That this story was. Do I believe that or not? Well, if you look at Gnosticism, in a sense, it's very similar to Buddhism. Very, very similar to Buddhism. The Cathars really kind of preached a lot of Buddhist principles. So I wouldn't say it's outside of the realm of possibility, but honestly, I think we really don't know. I think that we can have faith. You can have faith in Jesus or your God or whoever that might be or whatever you want to believe in. But at the end of the day, the only thing that you can do is have a relationship with God. And that relationship with God, and don't make me sound like a solipsist, is your relationship with yourself. And everybody who's listened to me for a long time understand and know this. So Laura says, so by your definition of love, Buddha is saying to live without attachment is saying to live without love. Actually, Buddha is saying to live without attachment is Buddha saying to live without attachment is Buddha saying to live with gratitude. Does that make sense? To simply have gratitude, to have appreciation for being and all being. Not to live without love, but to live with gratitude. And now what I meant there is to know God is to know yourself. To know yourself is to know God. And the reason is because, let's take anybody out there, for instance. If you and I were having a conversation, the only way that I can know you, right, is you say words. I can't get in your mind. I can't feel what you're feeling, even if I'm an empath. I can't feel what you're feeling. I can't know your thoughts. I can't know what you're saying. I can't know any of this stuff. The only thing I can experience is me and my inner being, my experience, myself, right? Which means that everything that you say, everything that you do, your actions, your influences, all your interactions, your body language, your voice, the tone, all this stuff resonates to a certain degree within myself of the level at which I know myself. So if you're expressing an emotion that I'm very immature at, I wouldn't know it because I'm very immature at that, and I wouldn't pick that up because I don't know it with myself, so how can I know it within you? But see, if I know myself, and I'm very mature in understanding myself and the different aspects of who I am and what I am and how my body is constructed, how my mind is constructed, how my spirit and my mind integrate to each other, and the degrees of which the different archetypes in the mind play out, intelligence levels are structured, how knowledge is based, how information operates. If I understand how all these things work and operate to a high degree, this means that I can know you better than you can know yourself. Simply because I know myself better than you know yourself, which means that you reflect towards me at certain high degrees of how I know myself. And this is how a lot of psychics actually work, is they can pick up exactly who and what you are simply by knowing themselves and interacting with you. Now, this goes to say that God is a relationship between you and your creator. And you can only know your creator to the degree you know yourself. For you can't know anything about God that you don't already know about yourself. Now that's a... And so now you start to define what God could be, potentially, a little bit different. Because at the end of the day, look, I mean, I love all you guys, but I can't experience your reality. Therefore, the only existence that I know is true and definite is my own. And I exist within a realm of something. of which you all exist in that realm of something. But I just call it is. So the only things that I can prove without a reasonable doubt exist is I am and it is. Me and it. That's it. I am and it is. And I have a relationship with it. And you are all a part of that it. I have a relationship with it. And so therefore, the only thing that I can truly know is myself and the reflection of my relationship of it through knowing myself. And that is the ultimate relationship with God in my perspective. So Thomas says, yes, but you're making those judgments through your own filters. You nailed it. Now think about that. Think about that long and hard. So if you understand what your filters are nothing more than your limitations. Your limitations are nothing more than your beliefs. Now, beliefs do not necessarily have to be true. Some people believe the earth's flat. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. I don't believe it is. And I don't believe it is because I've seen evidence to the contrary. But here's the thing. Is some believe that gravity is some, turtle pulling the earth through space. Now, that's highly illogical. Could be true. Maybe. I don't know. But that's highly illogical. And that belief we would construe as false. But people believe that. Which means that they organize everything else based upon the filter of that belief. And so if you understand that your belief is a limitation, that is the first step to non-belief. And what I mean by that is to reduce or limit the effect that your beliefs have on the information that you are receptive upon. Which means that as information comes in from your external environment, from the it is, from another person, from a relationship, from a communication, whatever it might be, is if you are aware of your filters, of your beliefs, of your limitations, now you can utilize them to gauge the information and change your perspective upon that information as it comes in, because you now know what your limitations are. So if I know my limitation is that gravity is this force that is existent between the ether pushing back on a perturbation within its vibrational field, and this is what gravity is, and I'm set on that, that means that all other interpretations, all other things of gravity that come through my thinking are going to default directly to that thought. And all knowledge that comes out from there is going to be a derived version of that knowledge base. Now, here's the thing. If I know that all belief is inherently not true, it's true, it's truth and half truth, or half false, half true. What do I mean by that? Is the only truth in the universe is the absolute. That's it. There's only the absolute. The absolute is unknowable. It's unimaginable. It's incomprehensible. You cannot understand it, know it, or even conceive it because it is totality. It is everything in existence all at the same moment throughout all existence of all times and spaces and universes. That's the absolute. That's the all-knowing. Now, here's the thing. Is a conscious being existing within the absolute, as being a character within the book. You do not know the world outside of the book. You only know the pages in between. Which means that you are only self-evident to the knowledge you are privy to that the absolute reveals to you, which would be the knowledge in between the pages of that book. Not everything else, the library that the book exists in. So this is the difference between the absolute and self-evident truth. And so this means that all truth that we derive through is self-evident truth, which means that it's all really half-truths because it's not really the absolute definition or truth of what potentially could be. So this means that nobody's wrong and nobody's right, but we're all on a journey of discovery to discover and find out what it potentially could be. And so all interpretations are on the table. So when you have this mindset, now your belief is a variable instrument and not a filter that just throws one thing this way and accepts this because it is. It becomes variable, that your limitations are now expansive and growing. I always put it like this. It's like your mindset. Imagine your mindset is a box that you live in, okay? That your belief system is a box that you live in. And there's 4 types of people in the box. Or there's 4 types of people in this world. Firstly, there's these people who live in the box. They don't know that the box exists. Okay? And the box controls and dictates their whole life. Very primitive belief structure. The second type of person, they realize that the box exists. They live in the box. They choose to live in the box because that's comfortable and they don't like change. The third type of person, they control the people that live in the box. The fourth type of people realize that the box never existed. And these are the interesting people because what they do is they're continuously pushing on that box of limitation day in and day out, expanding the boundaries further and further and further past their limitation. This is learning something that you did not know that you did not know. This is an epiphany, an aha moment. This is the only true growth and the only true evolution in the universe, is pushing those limitations of your belief system, making your belief system variable, and expanding that knowledge base beyond anything you can ever understand. That is where growth comes from, and that's how you learn and develop to know yourself, which increases your relationship with God, Creator, the universe, Jesus, whoever you want to call it. So Summer says, Josh, I have a serious question. Do you ever secretly fear that any of your beliefs could possibly be misleading you in the wrong direction? I have that fear. That's what makes it hard for me. The problem is you have fear. I'm going to give you the Scooby-Doo scenario. So did you know that there is one moral, the same repeating moral, built into every Scooby-Doo episode? And I think I'm the only person in the world that does this, by the way. And so this is very simple to understand. Is we all know at the end, Shaggy, Scooby, all of them, they're Thelma, they take the mask off and like, oh, it's Mr. Johnson. But see, there is one underlining moral of every Scooby-Doo episode, and that was this, is that every monster is nothing more than another human being in a mask. And when you remove that mask, you take the power away from that monster and you empower yourself of the knowledge of who they are. Now, let me extrapolate this for you. That monster is fear. That fear is undefined. You don't know what it is. The moment you investigate, you look into, you experience that fear. You go out there and you hypercritically analyze that fear. You define the information surrounding that. You remove its mask. You take the power away from that fear and you empower yourself with the knowledge. All fear is nothing more than undefinition of undefined aspects. You remember we just talked about with love and how attachment is this expectation of not knowing what's going to happen to those people you love, you're not being in control of their actions and influences? That's fear. It's undefined of their future, and that scares the shit out of you. And so if you have fear in your life, like you're describing right there, define it, investigate it, understand it, remove its mask, okay? Remove its masks and empower yourself. So Insomniac says, that's one of the first lines I ever said to Josh, then he joshed me. But I still stuck to that. Just a good way to sum it up, limiting vocabulary on this planet. What happened there? I missed it. Oh, I must have missed it. But yeah, so fear, right, is this mechanism of undeterminism, of undefinition, of not knowing, but expecting, and anticipating the expectation, but having doubt in the process and the flow. And so you have to define these processes, these systems. You have to define what that fear is. You have to remove its mask and find out what it really is. And that comes through what? Pushing those boundaries of limitation, learning something that you did not know that you did not know, the process of discovery. And so for you, what you were just saying there, and I want to get into this real quick, is do you ever secretly fear that your beliefs could possibly be leading you in the direction? So your beliefs never lead you anywhere except backwards. If you allow your beliefs to dictate and control your life, they will lead you in one place, and that's stagnation, non-growth, period. And a lot of people will hate me for this, but this is what I'll say. If you allow external How about this? If you haven't seen my shirt, slave, when one involuntarily, forcefully, or through their own ignorance allows an external force or information to dominate and control their thoughts, actions, and reality. If you allow that to happen, you are a slave. Now, if you allow a book to dictate your thoughts, your actions, and your reality, you're a slave. If you allow an external force that someone presses upon you as information, as the true source of information, you are a slave. I know that sucks for a lot of people. I know you're going to hate me. But that's the truth of the matter, is it not? Think about it. If we take it into the context of everything I've said here, right? Books, knowledge, information, they're guides to expand belief, to remove the walls of limitation, to expand those laws of limitation, to bring about experiences and knowledge of the self that one did not know, that they did not know, that promulgates real growth, that allows you to know God, Creator, your only relationship that you truly have, better. Isaiah 14:6. They that see thee shall narrowly look upon thee and consider thee, saying, is this the man that made the earth to tremble? I guess I don't know the context of that. Maybe you guys had a different conversation. I was looking for Heidi's. But yeah, so it's just an interesting perspective. And thank you. I'm glad you love the shirt. But yeah, I mean, listen. And so I don't let anything dictate my beliefs except for my expanding knowledge, my understanding, the self-evident truths that I grow and understand every day. That's what dictates my thoughts, my actions, and my reality. No external source dictates that inherently. Awesome. Thank you, Ye. Man, Ye, we got to do a show together. We got to get you on and get you on a show, just me and you. I think it'd be a great comment. Maybe you should come on Insomniac night one night. Can you do that? Or Insomniac hour. Why don't we schedule Ye for Insomniac hour, her, me, and maybe even Dimitri. We just shoot the shit. I think that'd be a great idea. Maybe we can do that tomorrow night. If you're up for it, Ye, you let me know. I'd love to have you on. I'm liking this show, so I think that we can do this more and more every week. Dimitri, it looks like, will probably be doing this, probably taking this over once he gets his schedule a little bit better. I'm going to help him out until then. We got Haley doing her show, which is going to be awesome on Sunday. We're trying to get Right Side Baddie on that show with her. But no computer. You can do it from your phone. That's fine. I wrote it. She said, I believe everything and nothing at the same time. Well, that's the perspective of duality, right? Everything and nothing. I believe, how about this? I believe nothing. I understand nothing. I know nothing. And see, sometimes I feel like Socrates, is that there's one thing for certain that I know, and that I know nothing. And see, I had this experience one time where I went into this deep meditative trance, non-drugged induced. I used to be able to go out of body and go into these massively deep meditative trances. And I said Haley. Her name's Haley, not Heidi. I know, I'm so sorry for that. But so I used to go into these deep meditative trances, and this one time I kind of came out and I was in this like this grayish mist. There was this like sound. I don't even know how to explain it. It was like angelic music, but it wasn't music. It wasn't even sound. It was sensation and feeling and taste and understanding and it was so many things. But you're in this state of existence. And I realized that this was like samadhi or one of these states. And I'm like trying to figure out what to ask. And it occurred to me that I was in the state of all existence. I was in the state of absoluteness, of which all is known. And it dawned on me, if I know everything, then I have no questions to ask. Think about it. The only reason you ask a question is because you need the answer. Therefore, if you have all answers, there are no questions to ask. So if you are existent in absoluteness, in all of existence that has all the answers, there's no questions to ask. Therefore, you know nothing. Isn't that profound? It's one of the most profound meditations I've ever been in my life. The understanding that in this state, I knew everything. And here's the thing, is you knew everything. You felt it. You experienced it. You tasted it. It was like synthesasia 1 billion times over. You just knew everything. But you couldn't think of one question to ask to see what you knew. And see, that's the dilemma, I believe, of the creator. That is the paradox of the creator and why we're all here. At least that's my understanding as it today. Is that if you are the creator, if you are absolute totality, you are everything, you know everything, therefore you are nothing and you know nothing. For there are no questions to ask, and there is nobody to ask them to, and there is nobody new to get to know. Now that's some crazy shit. That's a good thought, Thomas, to go get high as fuck to, I guess, huh? All right, guys. Much love, respect. God bless. Take care. We'll see you tomorrow night on Daily Dose, and then right afterwards on Insomniac hour. If Yay or Insomniac, if any of you guys want to come on tomorrow night with us, you just let me know. This show is completely open for really anybody who wants to come in here and shoot the shit with us. So far, it's Dimitri and Vince. And so if anybody of you guys want to come on, just let us know. Send me a direct message and we'll get you on the show. You guys take care. We'll talk to you here soon. Be well, guys.